Today we're going to be talking all about tons of different lily varieties. Last week I did a video all about the dahlias that I've grown over the years, and in today's video I want to do the same thing but for lilies. And you know, the great thing about lilies is that you can have lilies blooming from the beginning of June till the end of August as long as you plant the right ones. When you pull up a chart of how lilies bloom, you can see that the Asiatic and the double Asiatics bloom first. Now, here's the thing about a lot of these charts. There's a lot of overlap here. So as you have the Asiatic and double Asiatic coming into bloom, you're also going to see the Martagon lilies start to bloom, followed quickly by the Trumpets. Then we're going to have LA lilies, and those are followed by the always popular Oriental lilies, double Orientals, Lancifolium, and Rubrum. I get all my lilies from Longfield Gardens. This is not a sponsored video, but I do have that long-standing code with them, and I'll put that on the screen now. I'm only making all these videos about flower bulbs because, quite frankly, I'm covered in snow. I want to be helpful, and there's really not much more I can do in terms of talking about gardening in the midst of January. But let's first click on Asiatic lilies. I want to go in order of bloom time. So here in South Central Pennsylvania, Asiatic lilies start to bloom in June. And some Asiatics I've noticed bloom sooner than others. Take for instance one that we grew this year called Corsage lily. Now it's worth noting that if you plant an Asiatic lily in the fall, the next spring it's going to be taller and more robust than an Asiatic lily planted in the spring. It has all that time to root in over the winter season before blooming for you in the spring. So when we're talking about this Corsage lily that we grew together last year, I planted those bulbs in the fall. You can plant lilies in the fall, or you can plant them in very, very early spring, or even into the summer, as long as they're held at the right temperature. Okay. Corsage lilies are amazing, and if I just click on this small square picture that Longfield has, we might not be able to see that these are multi-headed lilies. Most Asiatic lilies are about the size of my hand, but Corsage had tons of petite blooms on a single stem. I would say the blooms on Corsage were probably about the size of my palm versus my entire hand. So we have one big stem, about a dozen blooms along that stem. They bloom from the bottom all the way to the top. A beautiful yellow color. It was a pale yellow with salmon pink tips, dramatic maroon freckles, and as I say, a dozen or more blooms per stem. So some really interesting things to note about this lily. It's early blooming, the blooms are small, lots of blooms per stem, and if you plant the bulbs in the fall, you can expect to see them bloom, if you're in a similar location to me, in very early June. As a matter of fact, I sold these at the flower stand on my daughter's last day of school. So we're looking somewhere around June 3rd. One other reason to love Corsage lilies and all Asiatic lilies is that they have absolutely no fragrance whatsoever. So if you like the look of lilies but you don't like the smell, I would say go for an Asiatic or a double Asiatic lily. Asiatic lilies are going to be blooming in June. So I also like to think about what else do I have blooming in June, and that also helps me narrow down what I want to purchase. So something like the Sunset Mix that has some really nice yellows, oranges, and reds in it. But I don't really have a lot of colors to support that in terms of secondary flowers, line flowers, and filler that would match that yellow, orange, red color palette in mid to late June. But I do have lots of pinks and whites and purples and blues and greens in early to mid June. So rather than go for a orange lily like Forever Susan, which I have grown before and I liked it, but I felt like the timing of that lily was wrong, I would instead recommend something like one of my personal favorites, Rosella's Dream. I've been growing Rosella's stream in the driveway garden for about 4 years, and I am completely in love with this Asiatic lily. If I had to choose between corsage and Rosella's stream, here's what I would do. I think corsage is really interesting and unique and unusual, and I love the coloring and I love all the blooms. However, as someone who makes and sells bouquets, I think that Rosella's Dream is a better choice. You're going to get about 3 to 4 blooms per stem. The flowers are upright facing. I always prefer upright facing lilies to outward or downward facing lilies when it comes to making bouquets. That way, when I'm holding the bouquet in front of me, I like to hold the bouquet away from me as I build. I don't have to worry about injuring any of the blooms that might have started to crack open because they're facing outward. They're facing away from me as I build that bouquet. Rosella's Dream. The petals are lovely. They're cream colored with a bit of pink. It's a lighter pink in the center. As you go outward, it's more of a vibrant hot pink. Beautiful chocolate freckles in the center. I just love this flower. As with all lilies, you're going to want to remove the pollen for your customers so that it doesn't stay in their tablecloth and you don't have to worry about it from a safety standpoint for their pets. But overall, I absolutely love Rosella's Dream, and I could not recommend her enough to you. If you're looking for a nice Asiatic mix, I would personally recommend the summer wine mix. I grew that for about 2 to 3 years. I've slowly started to just cut them down to the ground so they don't come back at all. If you want a lily to come back year on and year out, but you also want to cut it, you always want to leave a third of the plant behind to die back naturally and regenerate the bulb for next year. Those are some of my favorite Asiatic lilies. Now let's talk about double Asiatics. These bloom about the same exact time as our Asiatic lilies. The ones that I'm showing here on the website are Bentley and Double Lady. Now, I've grown a lot of double Oriental lilies, and those lilies don't have any pollen, which is awesome. So right as the Asiatics are coming into bloom, the Martagon lilies are also starting to bloom. I do see a little bit of overlap there in my garden. The Martagon lilies bloom, I would say, in late June here in South Central Pennsylvania. Growing up, I had never heard of a Martagon lily. My grandma grew so many lilies in her garden. In fact, the fragrance, I would say, was almost overpowering when you would walk into her house. I loved it, but I know some people don't love that. But here's the thing about Martagon lilies. They do have a fragrance, but it's subtle, sweet, and I would say universally appealing. Now, of course, there's going to be a small group of people that don't like this fragrance, but to me, it almost smells like real vanilla. That's the way I can describe it. And it's subtle. You have to sit right next to it to smell it versus pulling into the driveway and being hit with that fragrance of an Oriental lily like Stargazer. Another differentiating factor with Martagon lilies is that they take a while to get established. If I plant an Oriental lily in early April, I can count on it blooming that July. If I plant a Martagon lily in early April, I can count on it blooming not this June, not a few months from that April, but a whole other calendar year from that. I'm looking at a 1 to 2 year investment until I see the Martagon lilies really get comfortable in the garden, and they get better as the years go on. Once they get established, they come back reliably. They can also take a part shade location, so that is also excellent. My personal favorite, as I say, it doesn't look like Longfield's selling it. It's called Alberta Morning, and it's this amazing lily that will captivate you with its two-toned white and cranberry pink flowers. We've got prominent dark pink freckles on the petals. That just adds pizzazz to the bloom. 3 to 4 foot stems. They've got a candelabra of downward facing blossoms, recurved petals, and really prominent stamens. There's so many reasons to love Martagon lilies. I want to invest in more of them. Let's talk about using them as cut flowers also. I did try to sell these at the flower stand, and I felt like since it took them so long to bloom, it was kind of that 1 to 2 years of waiting. It really wasn't worth the investment. You know, the money that I spent on the bulbs, the time I spent waiting, I would have rather just either left them in the garden for myself or used them in more elaborate designs. I do believe I have a picture where I put them in bouquets at the flower stand. I wouldn't do that again. There's a lot of pollen involved there. The pollen, oh man, this pollen on Alberta morning is bright orange and it will stain anything. In fact, I still have Alberta morning pollen on the interior of my white kitchen cabinets, but it's so beautiful. I would grow it for the garden or for personal use or for more elaborate designs that you might be doing. So now we find ourselves at the trumpet lilies. And as I say, friends, here, I think there's a lot of overlap. I think you could actually group all of these that we've talked about so far together. Asiatic, double Asiatic, Martagon, and Trumpet. You're really going to get all those blooms in the month of June. So let's talk about some of my favorites in this category because I love trumpet lilies. As I mentioned, my grandma grew tons of lilies. Her favorites were these crazy tall trumpet lilies and also the Orientals. I adore both of those because of her and because I just love tall flowers. I have a thing for blooms that are at height level, and with a trumpet lily, you can stare directly in the face of your flowers. Let's start with African Queen. This lily blooms in a range of orange hues from melon to mango, all with a raspberry reverse. What do I mean by that? Basically, since a trumpet points slightly downward, you're seeing a lot of what the petal looks like on the exterior. And when the exterior color is completely different from the interior color, you get a lot more dimension to that bloom. I really loved African Queen. Let's talk about Regale because I've been growing this trumpet lily longer than any other trumpet lily. It's an elegant lily native to southwestern China, and it was first introduced back in 1903. So you read about this lily all the time. It has 4 to 6 foot stems. I would say mine, I'm thinking they're 5 years old, and I feel like they're 5 feet tall. They bear intensely fragrant but pleasant trumpet-shaped flowers that are 6 to 8 inches long. And when we grow these in full sun and rich, well-draining soil, clumps of these lilies get larger each year and eventually will produce as many as 20 flowers per stem. Now, I have not reached that 20 flowers per stem capacity yet because I often have cut these lilies. I probably won't cut them as much in the future. By the time we hit late June, I'm really full on with the Asiatic lilies, and those are the ones that I like to cut. So I'll probably leave most of the trumpets in the garden in the years to come and just focus on cutting my Asiatics. But if you like white and pink in the garden, I think you're going to really like having this trumpet lily. Now here's the thing with the OT lilies and the way that I see this chart that Longfield has. They've got Trumpet, Asiatic, Oriental, Longiflorum Asiatic, and Oriental Trumpet. Once again, I think we can probably group those AO, LA, and OTs together and just say that they bloom late June into early July as a group. Once you get into mid to late July, that's when we're going to start to see the Orientals and the double Orientals and even the species lilies. But let's just consider these mixed breeds of lilies as our middle group, blooming from approximately late June all the way through the end of July, depending on the variety. And let me know what your experience has been. But I have one OT lily, Eastern Moon, that consistently blooms before all the other OT lilies. So I'm looking at a couple here that we've grown over the years and that I still have in the garden, and some that my parents grow also. Eastern Moon, Purple Prince, and Scheherazade. Eastern Moon always blooms first. In fact, right as Regale is dropping its petals, Eastern Moon is blooming, and that one stays in bloom. I am not exaggerating here, easily a month to a month and a half. I see that that bulb is a little bit more expensive. It is completely worth it. You're going to pay, I think, $5 more for Eastern Moon versus Purple Prince. Completely worth it. It's a completely different animal. Eastern Moon has luminous blossoms that are pale, silvery pink with a burgundy reverse and a glowing yellow throat. I really cannot say enough good things about this flower. So Oriental trumpets, O-T, taking the first letter of those words, they are fragrant. Orientals are fragrant, trumpets are fragrant. Personally, I find OT lilies a lot less fragrant than Orientals. Chime in with your thoughts on that in the comments section below. So these are really fragrant, but I like the fragrance. And since I'm not cutting them and bringing them inside like I would a short Oriental lily, I think the fragrance is palatable. I think it's enjoyable out there in the garden. What did I just say? Out there? I don't know where I'm from today, but you get what I'm saying. Please think about growing Eastern Moon Lily if you want to grow an OT. This is by far, in my opinion, the best one. The next one that I've grown for I think 3 years is called Purple Prince. Here's the really interesting thing about Purple Prince. It says that it grows 4 to 5 feet tall. Now I have been cutting Purple Prince, so it has not been able to reach its full potential here in terms of height, stem width, and the amount of blooms yet because I've been cutting it. I haven't been leaving the entire plant there to die back naturally and regenerate the bulb. I've only been leaving a third of the plant intact after I cut it to regenerate the bulb. So that's gonna set it back a little bit in terms of the height that I can expect the next year and the amount of blooms that I can expect. The one thing about Purple Prince that was very interesting, you know, I've heard over the years that the amount of rainfall you get and the amount of heat stress a plant experiences can drastically affect the color. And wow, did I see that firsthand with Purple Prince. The first year that I grew it, and I sent in my pictures, it was a pale yellow and quite disappointing. I thought, this is not purple at all. This is a light dusty pink. What's going on here? I sent in the pictures and my boss said, oh, that's just because of your weather. The next year we were back. Normal temperatures, normal rainfall. The year when it was really light colored, it was very hot and dry. The year that we had regular rainfall and the temperatures were normal for what we have here in Pennsylvania, it was that beautiful, I would say, magenta color. Purple is so hard, right? Purple covers a wide range of hues. I feel like Purple Prince, when it's doing what it's supposed to do, when it's happy and getting the rain and getting the right temperatures that it requires, it is magenta, and it is quite stunning. The other OT I've grown, and I also gave some to my parents, and they still have them growing in their garden, is Scheherazade. And I hate to put a flower down, but I really did not like this lily. It was a nice color. It's yellow and a brick red. The flowers point downward for me, and I don't know why this happened. It bloomed a lot later. I felt like this one didn't bloom until late July. But what I really did not like about this OT lily was the fragrance. Musky, ugh, yuck. I really could not stand the smell of Scheherazade. So personally, this lily was just not for me. The fragrance was just too overpowering, but I could tell that it was a strong growing lily. I really liked how strong the stems were. It was a nice tall plant. I think if you had a much larger property, or if you just set these lilies at the very back of the border and they weren't right in your face, that kind of just overpowering fragrance might not be a problem, but having them right along the walkway leading into our front door, That was a mistake on my part. That was a personal mistake. Now let's move on to LA lilies. I love LA lilies, and my favorite one is Royal Sunset. Royal Sunset blooms for me in, I would say, early July. Sometimes it might be blooming the last week of June. I'll have to check my pictures. I'll put an exact date on the screen for you of when I took these pictures. These lilies have large, upward-facing flowers. They are gold, rose, and apricot. The colors change throughout the day, becoming warmer or cooler depending on the light. It looks lovely with purples, yellows, and pinks. It's about 30 inches tall, so it's an ideal height for perennial borders, but personally, I use all of mine for cutting. And what I do with LA lilies, since they only grow about 30 inches tall, is that I buy new bulbs every single year. So yes, that is an investment, but at 25 to 30 inches, it's better for me to just cut the plant all the way down to the ground. I actually normally just pull up the whole plant and then cut the bulb off and just process them very quickly and plant new bulbs next year, versus waiting for them to regenerate over the course of 2 or 3 years. Because for me, I really need that long stem length in order to be able to sell them. Now, with most bulb suppliers, in fact, with all larger bulb suppliers, the more you buy, the cheaper the bulb is going to be. So instead of buying 10 of something, if you're buying 300, the price is going to go down. And all of a sudden, composting some of these less expensive lily bulbs can make sense as long as you can sell them. And here, lilies are incredibly valuable. I can always sell them. So for me, using a lily bulb like that as an annual essentially is worthwhile. Won't work for everybody, but that's what I do with Royal Sunset. Now let's talk about another great lily. This is a OA lily, Oriental, Asiatic, called Kaveri. I could be saying that wrong. Please feel free to correct me in the comment section. I've been growing this one for a few years and I am completely in love with these blooms. As you'll be able to see in the footage that I'm going to show you, Eastern Moon Lily is still blooming when Kavari is blooming. Oh my word, that combination of the silvery, dusty rose at 5.5 to 6 feet tall and these stunning, vibrant orange blooms at about 4 feet tall. I just loved that combination. If you love bold colors in the garden, I think you're really going to love this particular lily. It's a very exciting new OA hybrid that combines the compact height and upward-facing flowers of an Asiatic with the large, sweetly fragrant blossoms of an Oriental. It really catches your eye with its golden yellow petals. It's brushed with tangerine and burgundy, and as I say, the plants are about 3 to 4 feet tall. Lots of buds on the plant. Did I sell this one? I can't remember. I don't think I did. I think I just left it in the garden to enjoy it. And I'm gonna let you in on a little bit of a secret. I removed all of these from the garden last fall. In fact, I have a brand new color palette to show you this spring, which I have not talked about at all. It's gonna be a big surprise. It's something I've never done before. But with the pink color palette that I'm going for next year, I replaced these with Rosella's Dream that we talked about before. But this is a gorgeous lily if you love orange. Just fantastic. Wow, friends, there's so many great Orientals to talk about on the screen. I think I'm gonna go through these just rapid fire and tell you what I like and what I don't like about each one because there's just so many. Casablanca, that is our standard, ginormous, white, highly fragrant Oriental bloom. I like it in the garden. It's very fragrant. If you want a white lily for cutting, I do not feel like Casablanca is the right one. I would instead go get a white Asiatic lily instead, or a white LA lily, and let Casablanca be its highly fragrant self and really tall self in the garden. So just like Casablanca, I feel like Stargazer is great out in the garden. It's tall, it has lots of blooms, and it's highly fragrant. It also faces outward. When it comes to cutting, I prefer, if possible, to get one that at least faces slightly upward. And I feel like Marlin does face slightly outward. It's a more subtle pink than Stargazer. Most blossoms display a subtle darker pink stripe and a sprinkling of dark pink freckles. The upward facing extra large flowers are intensely fragrant. Let me talk about that for a second. Here's the hard thing. When somebody says it's intensely fragrant, if you like the fragrance, that's a good thing. If you don't like it, that can be a bad thing. Personally, I loved the smell of Marlin, and I did not mind having an entire vase of that inside our home. Let's talk about a few other ones. Corvara and Dizzy. I've had Corvara for a long time, and I feel like it's a great flower to have in the garden. Once again, you're seeing a beautiful raspberry bloom, tons of freckling, highly fragrant, a nice tall plant. The thing about Corvara in real life, if I just click on this picture right here, I mean, you can tell that the petals are really recurved, but in real life, how much the petals are recurved, I feel like is slightly problematic in terms of a cut flower. It's hard not to crush the petals because when they recurve so much like this, so right, maybe you even cut them in tight bud, but still when they open, they're going to recurve. And then I just feel like they're getting mushed around in the vase. I feel like there's a better choice in terms of a cut Oriental lily, but it is stunning in the garden. I grew Dizzy in a raised bed last year, and I don't think I'll ever grow it again. There was something very dizzying about the way it looked, and I really just didn't like it. You know, I don't know. Sometimes you just don't like a bloom. Let me know what you think. Do you like Dizzy, or do you just think it's way too dizzy? Now I'm really excited, and I hope you will be too, because we're going to talk about double Oriental lilies. In Pennsylvania, these bloom in mid to late July. I love them as cut flowers. Love, love, love rose lilies as cut flowers. They don't have any pollen. They are fragrant, but it's a subtle fragrance that's lovely. They come in the best shades. Basically right now, they're just in whites and pinks. And also they are the ideal height for cutting at about 4 feet tall. I always invest heavily in rose lilies, and it always pays off. Now, unfortunately, it does not look like at this time that Longfield is selling Editha, but I do want to talk about Editha because I think it's the best rose lily around. So wherever you can get it from, I would search out a few. It is the most beautiful light bubblegum pink rose lily I've ever seen. Here's the great thing. A lot of people ask me about wedding flowers and timing out wedding flowers and what wedding flower should I grow. Lilies, double Oriental lilies. If you have a wedding in late July, you can pick that lily, you can hold it in refrigeration. Even if you have a wedding in early August, you could pick it and hold it in refrigeration. It's not going to mess up the bride's dress. You don't have to worry about the fragrance being overpowering, and you can know it's going to bloom. You can time it out on time. Ramona, if you want a white lily for a wedding in late July, early August, definitely rose lily Ramona. I have some pictures and video of that so you can really see what it looks like. I even think just a bouquet of only rose lily Ramona would be an amazing wedding bouquet. Only good things to say about that. And you know what? Here's the thing with lilies. Here's the investment. the 2 seconds that it takes to, dig 6 inches and put the bulb in the ground and cover it back up, that's my only time investment into these flowers. So I love that. That's so worthwhile. Think of how much time and energy and stress sometimes it is growing things from seed. Stick a lily bulb in the ground, walk away. A couple months later, you have an amazing bouquet. Wow, I really have no idea how to say this. Maybe it's Anauska. That's probably really off. But here's the thing. I have tried to grow this rose lily for 4 years and it has never done good. And I do not know what's going on, but here's what's happening. Let me know what you think's going on. Only with this rose lily, it forms a bud. It looks like it's about to start to crack open. And then all of a sudden, it dies at that point. The petals get a little bit brown, a little bit mushy. It's almost like the exterior petals can't push themselves open and therefore almost smother the inside petals. It is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. The first year it happened, I thought, oh, certainly just a weather thing. The second year, oh yeah, the weather thing, did I do something wrong? The next year, I got new bulbs of that same variety. Same thing. So what's going on with this flower? I've grown Rose Lily Samantha and Rose Lily Tatiana. I like them both. They both remind me of Stargazer Lily. I think if I had to say the difference between the two, Samantha is more of a watermelon pink. Tatiana has a little more purple within the pink colorway. Both gorgeous, both just amazing, stunning rose lilies. So now let's talk about species lilies. I've only grown a small handful of species lilies, and for me, they bloom late July into August. So I'm really getting the end of the lily season with these species lilies. I've noticed that a lot of suppliers say that you can grow species lilies in shade. So when I first ordered some species lilies about maybe 5 years ago, I planted them in what I would consider a full shade location. I do not feel like in my area that they could handle full shade. Maybe they can take some shade, but they weren't able to stand upright in shade like a Martagon lily was able to do. I did a video on growing lilies in containers, and really the concept of growing lilies in containers completely changed my garden. It's easy to grow lilies in containers. It is easy to just plop that container right into the garden when you need color. It also makes the lilies taller. So many great reasons to grow lilies in containers. I'll link that video in the description section below. But if you take nothing else from this video, I just hope that you'll take the idea that lilies aren't just Casablanca and Stargazer lilies. They're not all these overpowering, overly fragrant flowers that we always see at the supermarket. Think about trying a Martagon lily. Think about trying an OT lily, an LA lily, a double Oriental. So many great ones to choose from. Friends, I want to wish you a wonderful day out there in your gardens, and I hope that you find yourself surrounded by lilies this coming summer. Bye, friends.